Hey guys, welcome back to this week's RPG Devlog video. Last week I worked on completing the character window, which consisted of the inventory, the stats, as well as the ability page. And now I'm going to be working on getting a dialogue and questing system implemented. The dialogue stuff shouldn't be too hard, it's just that in order to make it user-friendly or easier to work with, I'm thinking of having my own editor in which I'm going to be making. So that's going to be where it's a little bit tricky. And for the questing system, I still need to really plan out how I'm going to be doing it. But nonetheless, I got the whole week for that. So, before I get started on the dialogue system, I decided I wanted to make things easier for myself when it came to testing by adding in support for multiple save files. So if I open up my save UI, and forgive me for the horrible UI as it's just for testing right now, but you can see that there are 3 save slots that you can save into / load from. I intend on keeping it at 3 as it will allow the player to have 1 save slot per class that I intend on having in the game. It's useful because it allows me to hop between different game states, and so if I wanted to test different features within the game in different environments, then it will allow me to easily, switch between those and test those all of those out rather than just relying on a single save file in which I would have to manually traverse to different states in order to test certain things out. And it was a tricky problem when it came to making sure that auto-saving of scenes was set up correctly to each particular save file. A scene represents the sort of environment or the level in which a player is currently interacting with. So for example, this level that you see right here, in which you're controlling your player through this forest level, that represents a scene. And so the way that my saving works is that it will go through each savable entity within this current scene. For example, your player's character, these goblin characters, these item pickups down here, those are all savable entities that when I choose to save, it will iterate through them and essentially save them or store them into the save file. The problem with that approach is that if I were to do stuff in this level and then let's say I were to traverse to a different level or a different scene, so if I were to save here, the initial problem that I had with my saving system was that it would not be able to save the state of the other level because it was not the current scene that the character or the player was currently in. I'm currently in this scene, the other scene was unloaded, and therefore I wouldn't be able to access and save. And so the way that I got around that was by creating an autosave file while a user was playing, that whenever I would transition into another level or do something significant, then I would make sure to autosave the state of that level I was transitioning from, and then whenever I would manually save, I would make sure to apply this autosave into the actual save file. And so this autosave would have information of both the scene that I was currently in as well as the scene of the previous scene that I was just in as well, thus allowing me to save both at once. And this was the system that I was working with, and it worked perfectly fine for a single file, but it became a little more complex to manage when I was working with different and multiple save and autosave files. And but I got that working, and I just wanted to share that with you all because this was such an interesting problem for me to deal with and be able to solve. But yeah, enough distractions. I'm gonna be going back to making the dialogue. Okay, so it's around 5:30 p.m. and I've just been finishing up the initial implementation of the dialogue system. So right now, NPCs that can be talked to will have a speech bubble displayed on top of their heads. If you click onto them, you will walk towards them and initiate a conversation with them, in which this conversation will enable the dialogue canvas to display the text boxes for both the NPC as well as your own dialogue choices down here. And depending on what you say, it will branch the conversation path differently. And once So for example, if I click on this, then what he will say back will be different from what he will say if I choose this option right here. And once the final conversation or the conversation line has been reached, it will then terminate the conversation and then disable the dialogue canvas. The base functionality of talking to an NPC finally works, and so I think I'm done for today in terms of programming. I have some visitors coming over pretty soon, so I think I'm gonna be taking a break. Okay, so back to work on the dialogue system and the dialogue editor this early morning. Last night I was spending a lot of time playing around with Unity's editor utility APIs. I've just been looking around and reading all the documentation and just trying different things out. And so now I'm at a point where I think I know enough, and now I'm getting to designing the actual editor and planning the functionality that I want for it. So here's some initial sketches that I've had made, and as you can see, I'd like each conversation node to be their own text box in the sort of entire dialogue editor window. I'd like the dialogue line to be a text field that I'd be able to modify within this editor and thus change its sort of line within the respective conversation scriptable object. I'd also like the conversation nodes to draw lines to their respective children to show their connections to one another. And so right now, what I've had made so far was the window in which I'd be using this sort of editor tool. And so now I'm going to be working on adding the functionality that will allow me to add and display these conversation nodes. Okay, so I've finally added in the functionality that will allow me to add and display conversation nodes into the dialogue editor. So as you can see with this conversation scriptable object containing no nodes selected, if I right click on the editor, then I have the option to add a node. And by doing so, it will construct a new conversation node and then add it into the list within the selected conversation scriptable object, and thus draw it out on the editor. I had to include some additional values into the conversation node class that would have to store, such as their vector2 position, as well as a UUID that would be generated for it at runtime. As you can see in the editor, right now there's a label entitled dialogue line and a text field area in which I can write into it and say, hey, my name is Irv, and then it will apply the change into the scriptable object conversation node. Right now I just need to add in the visualization of connections between nodes and their children. Because right now there's no way of being able to set the children with it being able to display onto the editor, as well as I need to create that functionality within this editor to draw lines or create connections between these nodes and thus modify the scriptable object within here. But after that I should be good to go. So it's a bit into the afternoon. I've just finished up the functionality for the connections between conversation nodes. So if I select this conversation scriptable object that you had seen in the game yesterday, then you will now see a full visual diagram of that conversation and the branches/paths the conversation will take. So as you can see, the first node has these two children in which it will draw a Bezier curve to their respective conversation node within the editor. And let's say if I wanted to make a modification to this conversation. So for example, I wanted this conversation node to branch into a different dialogue line than this one, then all I would have to do is simply right click on this conversation node in the editor, which will then give me the option to break its child connections. You can't see it right now because of OBS, but if I click on it, if I choose that option, then it will thus remove that line, which will signify that this conversation node has been removed from its list of child conversation nodes. So now if I were to add in this new node of the new dialogue line that I wanted, and if I were to give it some text to display, so I can say, I don't know, stop crying, then it will be created within the scriptable object, and thus I can make it so that this will be a child node of this conversation node. Then by just right clicking this node again and then selecting add connection, will thus create a Bezier curve in which I can attach to whatever conversation node that I'd like. And so if I choose this one, then it will establish that connection, and now this conversation node will have a child that points to this particular conversation node. And I've done all of this in this editor without ever having to touch this horribly ugly mess that's inside here. So now if I save this and I press play and then go into the game, it should create, or it should make that difference within the game. So as you can see, it now has a different dialogue option compared to that of compared to what it was before. And with that, I think this dialogue editor is mostly implemented. And you know, this was really exciting for me to make because this is one of the few tools programming I've ever done in Unity, and I'm just excited because this is something that I can use in any of my future projects. I will still definitely need to clean up a few more things, but it's approaching around the time where I'm going to be hanging out with a few friends, so I'll be working on that when I get back. Alright, so it's Wednesday morning. I've just been cleaning up some of the bugs in the dialogue editor before I start working on the questing system right now. I haven't really made one like this before, so I've definitely been spending a bit of time just doing some research online on the best way to go about doing this. And I think I still need to do a little bit more, but that's what I'm going to be working on today. Okay, so it's a little bit past 4, and I've just been completely unable to work due to how hot it is been here. I was able to get a little bit of work done for the questing system, but man, the heat's just been leaving me feeling super sluggish, so I think I'm gonna hold off on working until it cools off a bit. Okay, so it's Thursday afternoon. Yesterday I really didn't feel like working due to the heat, but today was much cooler, so I was able to get some more work done. So for the questing system, I was able to get a very basic implementation of it going on. So if I go to this guy and initiate a conversation with him, he will have a quest that I can accept. This will then fire an event if I choose to accept it to my quest log that will add this quest into my list of active quests, and then this quest will then have an objective in which I must fulfill in order to complete it, which would be to kill this particular enemy right here. So once I go and do that and kill him, then another event will be fired to my quest log signifying that I had completed this particular quest, which will remove it and then grant me the XP, gold, and whatever item rewards specified by the quest to give me. And there are a lot of major features that I'm currently missing with this system. Like, it does not support multiple objectives within the quest so far. So for example, if I wanted the player to first kill 3 goblins before changing the objective to then killing that orc to then changing the objective to return back to the quest giver to talk to them afterwards, I would not be able to do so. And so there is a lot of event firing I really need to take into account for, and I haven't been able to really completely figure that out yet. And so this really might extend out this task over the next few days. But yeah, that's where I'm currently at right now. Hey, it's Friday afternoon. I've just been editing together the footage to prepare to upload this week's RPG Devlog. I'm sorry that the last couple of days worth of footage hasn't been too engaging. I had to cut a lot of it out as the first few days in which I wanted to try discussing more technical design ended up taking a lot more screen time for this video, which is long enough as it is, and I thought they were more important to discuss or would be more interesting. But with that, I wanted to wrap it up for this week. I was able to get the dialogue system implemented, a basic questing system, a new ability, and some new UI changes in which I totally neglected to mention yesterday. But nonetheless, I thought overall the week was fairly productive. Though I was thinking maybe next week I'd be taking a break, as I've been knee-deep in development for a while now, and I'm still a bit stumped as to how to go further with the questing system. So I thought maybe taking some time to relax will give me some time to think about it. I also wanted to say thank you so much for all the support for my last devlog video last week. I was pretty nervous going into it, and so because I felt really exposed in terms of my process of making games, and you know, I just thought maybe it wouldn't be something that people really cared about, but all of the nice comments and feedback really meant so much to me and shown me otherwise. One of you guys had asked me a question along the lines of what I had sort of envisioned for this game in the future, and to be quite honest, I'm not very sure myself, because to me this is really a passion project that has the intention of being a portfolio piece that I can show off once I start applying for internships in the fall. And so this project is a result of sort of my observations of games like Diablo, of Path of Exile, or Torchlight 2 as case studies in which I'd be able to build systems that make up these games. Now, that all of that doesn't really mean I'm not trying to make this the best game I've ever made before, or that I don't have any direction planned for it. Like, I'm in the middle of fleshing out the story that I have in mind for the game. If you'd like to hear more about that, then let me know. And I'm still trying to fine-tune the gameplay and the combat to make it feel as fun as possible. It's just that realistically, I'd like to get all of the main systems within the game and have a playable prototype of it done by the end of my vacation, which will be around late September. Afterwards, I really like to be able to spend some time on my other projects, because to me, being able to get a job in the industry, within the video game industry, is the most important, and so I need to sort of stack up my portfolio with presentable pieces. But yeah, that's sort of what's in store for the game so far. I think after I finish the questing system, I'm gonna implement a sort of item shop, add some additional enemy AI behaviors, such as them being able to use abilities, as well as some other mechanics, and then afterwards I'll be switching over to adding actual playable content within the game. That way my playable prototype will be good to go by end of September. So I hope you all look forward to that. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe if you want to see more. But thanks so much for watching, and until next time.